Lens hoods. I use them all the time, and you probably should too. I'll tell you why. So lens hoods come in all shapes and sizes. I have a whole bunch of them here. You've probably seen a lot of these design. They kind of have the cutouts in them, petal shaped. These are for wide angle lenses so that the actual hood doesn't block the image. Longer telephoto lenses, you can use hoods like these, just a nice long lens hood. One like this is for 85 millimeters, pretty standard. And even though they all look different, they basically serve the same purpose or purposes, depending on what you're using them for. So why do I use them, and what are they really for? Well, the first reason you want to use them for is basically to block light from hitting the front of the lens. So a big lens like this, the 50 millimeter 1.2, has a really big piece of glass right in front there. And if you're shooting outdoors in the sunlight, even on a overcast day like this in diffused lighting, any light that's hitting the front of the lens is going to affect your image. So especially if you have sunlight that's shining right on the front of your lens, first of all, any imperfections in the lens are going to kind of stand out. You'll be able to see them. They'll affect the image. It'll definitely reduce the amount of contrast you have. It'll wash out the colors a little bit. So you want to keep sunlight from hitting the front of the lens. So if you're shooting directly into the sun, really nothing that you can do. But if you're shooting at an angle and the sun is coming down this way or from here or from the side at a sunset, this lens hood, a lens hood like this, will block the light from hitting. Instead of hitting here, well, you got a lens hood on and it's going to block sunlight from hitting, or any reflected light. Anytime there's light bouncing around, if it's hitting the front of the lens, it's going to affect your image. So you want to block stray light. You don't want the light hitting the lens, hitting the front of the lens, to affect your image at all. So that's one good reason to use this. Another one is for, and it's also weather related, outdoors, is for rain. I use these things all the time in the rain. You put this on the front of a lens and you can just stay outside and shoot and not have to worry about wiping the front of the lens off all the time as rainwater accumulates on it. As long as the rain is coming down, at a reasonable angle and not sideways like this. If it's coming down sideways, you probably shouldn't be outside shooting anyway. So, but keep a lens hood like this on while you're shooting in the rain. Let the rain hit this instead of the front of the lens. Keep your lens nice and dry. You'll get wet, your lens will get wet, your camera will get wet, but the front of the glass will stay nice and dry. This way you can shoot and you don't have water droplets all over your images. So definitely lens hoods for keeping the rain off the front of your lens. Definitely something that you want to do. Now I have lens hoods, whether I use them or not, always in my bag for all of my lenses. So in my camera bag, I have different camera bags, but the lenses always basically go in the same spot, depending on how big they are, where they fit. And even if I'm not using it, this always sits in the bottom of my camera bag. And when I put the lens in, it goes in, kind of just sits in there like this. It kind of keeps the shape of the bag, especially when the bag gets big and heavy and out of balance. It kind of keeps the shape in that space where this lens is supposed to go, and it just sits right in there like this. I take it out, even if I'm not using it, this is sitting there, I'm shooting, if I need it, I can just reach in and grab it, I know right where it is, snap it on, and now it's ready to go. So this is always sitting in the bottom. I see a lot of people use lens hoods, they'll have them reversed. I guess to just keep them someplace, have them reversed on the front of their lens like that. I don't like to do that. I feel like it gets in the way. It gets in the way of your manual focus ring, some of your controls on the side here. The control ring on these new Canon RF lenses, it gets in the way of that. I just don't like the way it looks, so I never do that. I leave them in the bag. But I always have them with me. And really the number one reason I use lens hoods the most often is just to protect the lens itself. The lens hoods I have a few that are cracked. They get totally beat up over the years, especially if I'm not carrying my camera in the bag, if I'm just holding it either like on a belt holster or just hanging it, on a sling across my body, and it's just flopping around, smashing into things. Having a lens hood on, this is it's expensive. It's glass. It can get damaged. Put a lens hood on the front of this, and now it's protecting it. You swing around, and your camera swings out and bangs into something, and this bangs into it instead. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and if these things are totally beat up. Like I said, some of them are cracked, they have scratches all over them, so those are hits that the lens would be taking, not just the front of the glass, but this whole front section here. There are focusing things, there's a filter thread here, protects the whole front of your lens, because it takes a beating. If you're out there shooting and you're changing lenses and especially if you have two camera bodies and one of them's not being used while you're shooting the other, every time I sit down on the ground to get low and take a shot, my camera or lens hits the ground. Having these things on the front of your lenses, definitely worth it. So definitely recommend using lens hoods all the time. Not all lenses come with hoods. The more expensive lenses do come with hoods. If your lens doesn't come with a hood, it's a few bucks, probably 15, 20 bucks more just to get the lens hood. Definitely get it. It's like a little insurance policy, and not just for protecting the glass and the lens itself, but it also in certain situations is going to make your images better. Like I said, especially to block out that stray light. You have something like this, a really deep, long hood, and everything it's felt inside here, so basically there's no light bouncing around or reflecting or anything. It's like a dark hole inside there, and blocks out any stray light, not direct sunlight, but reflected light also. So definitely recommend using lens hoods. Try to keep them with the lens that they belong with, because they're very easy to get mixed up. And one other thing, if you noticed, I have gaffer tape on all of my lens hoods. I started doing this years ago when I needed to carry gaffer tape around with me, just to have it. Sometimes I don't use it. I'll have it on a whole week-long trip and not use it even once. But when you need it, to hold something in place, to move something out of the way. To have gaffer tape with you is always pretty valuable. So I needed a place to hold it. So instead of carrying a roll around with me, I just basically rolled a piece of gaffer tape around each lens hood a few times. And now I have it with me. And it also actually, I found that if I'm propping the camera up on something and I'm leaning my lens hood on something, it actually gives it a little bit more grip than the smooth plastic lens hood would. So the gaffer tape on there helps for that also. So that's just a little thing I do. You may have noticed that I have tape on my lens hoods, but that's why. So definitely recommend using lens hoods as often as you can. I use them all the time. Just another neat little accessory, something that you can use to make your photography a little bit better, to protect your gear, and just something I definitely recommend doing. So I hope you found that helpful. That was a quick one. If you have any comments or anything about lens hoods or anything that you do that protects your lenses in any situation, leave them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.